got it. I'm okay. Now we are recording. Excellent. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Tonight's topic is on sensitive subjects and writing about the hard stuff. And there's a lot that to talk about. I mean, I would love to do just an hour of Q&A with you about difficult subjects in your own stories, anything that you may have faced or be facing right now. You may be here tonight because there's something sticky in your own story that you're grappling with. And I hope tonight to just give you some powerful mindsets in which to think about your own the hard stuff in your own story and the sensitive subjects. So I want to start with a question. If those of you have either been working on family stories or your own story, or you've read family stories, if you've ever had something just like fall off the shelf at exactly the right time, something that you read that just feels like this was meant for me right now. Or maybe it's the piece of information that you need. Sometimes I feel like they reach out and bite me, like the exact paper that I need is there. And in this work, there's so many uncanny things that happen. I just kind of believe it's not an accident. What I also believe is that the work we're doing today can be that for somebody else. The stories that we're writing now will become like a love letter to the future. We mail it off into the future, and someday somebody may find it at the exact moment that they need to hear from us. And that's the power of writing about the difficult moments in our own story. If we're vulnerable and if we share with others how we're getting through the hard stuff, it may empower future generations. It could be 2, 3 generations from now and give someone exactly what they need in exactly the right time. And I know that's out there, but that's how I roll because it's happened to me enough times. And so I just hope to encourage you and empower you to write about those difficult things and to have the faith that it will influence someone else for good in the future. But there are some caveats. And one of those caveats is just let's make sure that we're sending love letters to the future, time capsules, and not time bombs. In family stories, if we have this sort of power to change people's lives and influence others, one of the things that I believe most is that when we tell our story, it changes the ending. That has tremendous power in our own lives, for the lives of our families, and for future generations. But that is power not to be taken lightly, right? If it has the power for good, we also could potentially be sending time bombs. And so I want to help you sidestep some of that and maybe equip you with the mindsets that can help you navigate this difficult territory. So I have a few slides. I'm going to uh, start now, some visuals. So let me just share my screen here for a moment. Give me just a second to pull this up. Or not, hang on. I had it up and now, here we go. Let me share my screen. Okay, so let me put it in presentation mode. All right. So the first mindset that I hope you will embrace, Nancy, you and I have talked a lot about this. Anybody that's taken my classes knows that I believe that you are the hero in your own story. And there are a few things about heroes. Heroes take responsibility, they act with faith, and they also change and grow from the beginning of the story to the end of the story. And so if you write your story in a way that is vulnerable and real and focuses on some of those hard moments, you can show the moment, your darkest hour, and how your own darkest hour turned into your own spark of the divine. how your hardest moments led to the biggest answers. Another important mindset to keep in mind is that sharing your story can have a tremendous unburdening effect. Now, this unburdening effect is not to be taken lightly. This is a principle that I learned from Brene Brown and her wonderful work on um, shame. She's a shame researcher, and she talks about how the effects of bottling up our shame stories can be more detrimental than the actual experience itself. And that when we're vulnerable enough to share those difficult moments, the things we're not proud of, the things that were difficult in our lives, it can be tremendously unburdening. But this isn't something we do with just everyone, right? There are only certain people who have truly earned the right to hear our shame stories. There are maybe one or two people in our lives who truly will love us no matter what for our good stuff and our hard stuff and warts and all, and who will encourage us and help us walk through that path. And those are the people that we're looking for in our lives to share our stories with in an unburdening way. When we write those stories for future generations, we will have done some processing. So there's a big difference between journaling and the sort of things that I might do on a daily basis in my morning journaling that's really a lot like throwing up, right? It's getting the ugly stuff out and processing it and having a place to put it so that I know what to do with it. But I am definitely not going to burden my children with that, right? Like that is for me and my own processing. So just know that there's a big difference between journaling and therapy and writing for future generations. And one of the differences is that when we write for future generations, we've already kind of come out the other side. We've processed it, and we have a sense of, um, just coming out the other side. We've grown from it, and we're ready to share the lessons so that people aren't worried about us. When we share our stories right in the middle, those are the stories for our best friends, right? But those, if we were to share that with the whole world, they would just wonder if we're okay. So that's not the thing I plaster on Facebook. um, I'll give one quick example. I've always talked a lot about my dad in my family storytelling, and I realized for a long time that there was a reason I wasn't talking about my mother. And it wasn't because I love mom any less, but it was because she had dementia, and I was right in the middle of it with mom. It was hard. And I hadn't come out the other side yet. And I wasn't ready to talk about mom on stage. And even right now, my mother passed away just a couple of weeks. Most of you know that. So I get emotional talking about it. And this is the moment when I go to the next slide, right? Before I start to get emotional. So, as I mentioned earlier, with family stories, what could possibly go wrong? There are so many family dynamics. I see Corey nodding here. I can see your face because Corey and I are family members, and we know how tricky family dynamics can be. Um, so stories have the power of bringing families together, and they have the power of driving a wedge. So let's be careful with that power and not drive a wedge. So we talked about time capsules versus time bombs. There are, with DNA today, there are so many people who are unexpectedly getting time bombs. There are wonderful stories about people finding their birth families and reuniting. And these are the stories that are shared from the big DNA companies. But what's not shared are the families that find out my dad's not my biological father, or the story that we were told wasn't at all what we thought, or something that's in the past that's upsetting or difficult to handle. What if you find an ancestor story and find out that maybe one of your ancestors wasn't a great person? How do you handle that? So again, this is where we will come to some of the mindsets to help grapple with these issues. So again, covering difficult family history. What if you find out that one of your family members was a holder of enslaved people? That can be troubling and difficult. How do you sort through that? How do you handle the context of someone? I guess I just gave the answer. One of the most important answers is that we look at a person in context. Context is everything in a human, in a person today, as we understand each other and our current stories and what made us who we are. The rest of the story is what help us understand. And the context of the day, one of the most important things to keep in mind is that we must never judge people of the past based on today's cultural norms. Okay, we must never judge people of the past based on today's cultural norms. Also, I just want to say that may we all be judged by more than our biggest mistakes, right? Can you imagine if you made a big mistake and the one thing someone wrote about in your history later was that mistake? How fair is that? So I would encourage you, as you write about yourself, be gentle with yourself as you write about people of the past and people in your story, to paint a picture of context, paint a picture of someone as a whole person, the good things they did as well as the difficult things, so that it's not a one-sided story focusing on their one mistake. And I also believe that there are some stories that don't need to be retold. If someone has come out the other side and changed and grown, maybe it's not worth sharing. Maybe that person has, for lack of a better word, repented. And by putting that in your story forevermore, it keeps that difficulty alive forever. And maybe that's not something that needs to be shared. Here's another pitfall: insisting that your version of the truth is the truth. People, I'm going to tell you that wars are fought over the truth with a capital T. Wars are fought over being right with a capital R. People say wars are fought over religion. No, they're fought over I'm right and you're wrong. Don't do that in your family, please. Understand that every person sitting around a table views a story in a different way, from a different time. They came along in different birth order, and they will have an entirely different version. If you interview 5 members of a family who were all their eyewitness accounts of one story, you will get 5 different versions. And they're probably all right to one extent or the other. Now, if you're writing an official version, I like to try to do some negotiating and understand that maybe your version that you put in print should take some input and take some of that feedback into account. Uh, but wear a humility hat. Um, One of the things that I do when I'm presenting a draft of a manuscript is I present it with an advance apology. And I learned this from my very first book with my family's book. I presented it, and the apology goes something like this: I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know for what yet, but I'm sure you'll tell me. Because there's probably going to be something in this manuscript that I got wrong, something where I probably stepped on your toes and had no idea, because it was a sensitivity for you and I thought it was totally funny, but you didn't think it was so funny. Or I just flat out got it wrong. And so what I want to ask you, my loved one, my brother, sister, aunt, uncle, is to please tell me when I've written something or said something that maybe was unflattering or unkind or wrong, because I love you and I care about you. And I hope that we can work through this together, and I will just fix it, right? I'll fix it before other people see it, but I won't know to fix it unless you tell me. So that is what my advance apology looks like. And then later, when they tell me, I have to remember that I had that mindset, and I have to put on my humility hat and not fight. Please don't bite back. I had some experiences in the last few weeks of times when I was so grateful with family that I didn't bite back. It may have taken a decade for some relationships to heal, but they did ultimately heal. So just keep that in mind. It's worth waiting it out. It's worth waiting a decade for things to heal. So we've already been into mindsets. Another important mindset is grappling. In sensitive subjects, there's no one right answer. I wish I could tell you guys that I had a checklist, a tidy checklist of the right answer. This is what you must do when you encounter a sensitive subject. But what I'm telling you right now is that the answer is going to be unique to you and your situation. And the ultimate answer may very well be not by the book. I can't tell you how many times I've approached, whether it was a student situation at the technical college where I worked, or a family sensitivity where we had to get deep in the weeds of grappling. And it meant finding a trusted advisor. Corey, I'm looking at you because you are one of my trusted advisors in this world. Corey is one of the people that I call when I need to work through something, and we try to figure out what is the right thing to do now. And usually we don't know where it will end and what the right thing to do forever will be. What we figure out is the next right step. It's like the comment, the song in Frozen. What's the next? Tell me what the next right thing to do is. I should know what the song is, but it's something like, what's the next right thing? So we grapple, we kick it around, we get advice, we listen, and then we listen some more. I'm a prayerful person, so I approach it with a prayerful mindset and I ask for inspiration and I sleep on it. And then there comes a moment, always, when we know what to do. We know what the next right step is, and there's a sense of peace that happens, and you can feel it. And you and the others go, ah, that was the thing we were looking for. This is the conversation we need to have, the way we need to word this, the way to uh, uh, yeah, I could give a million examples, but we've got 20 minutes, so I'm going to be brief. But you just know in one moment, and then you have to believe in that answer and walk. And it can be hard because the moment you make that answer, you may second guess and doubt and not be sure what to do, but you have to take the next step. And only the darkness only starts to lift when we start walking in faith. So, guys, that's how I do it. It's not always perfect. Another mindset is to focus on triumph, transformation, and healing. So we don't write about the hard stuff in our stories because it's fun. It's not. And digging into the trauma in our lives can be deeply unsettling, and it may require getting some therapy. There is a place, especially in examining trauma in our stories, to seek professional help. Dredging these stories up can bring out the ugly. And I believe that when we're drawing out the ugly things that have been festering in the dark, the monsters thrive and grow and have power over us when they're in those dank, dark places. And when we start to draw them out, they have a tendency to come out swinging. They don't usually go down without a fight. And some difficult things can come up. And I would advise you to get the help of a trusted friend, a group, or a therapist, because it can be difficult. But I promise you that once you get it out in the light, those ugly things have a way of shriveling up, drying out, and not having power over us. So the path is worth it, but it can be difficult. So our focus here is on the triumph, transformation, and healing, and bringing our families together. So we talked about allowing space for other versions of the truth. I just think that's so important, that humility, um, recognizing the value of grappling. Look, guys, it's hard because it's hard. And finally, having strength in vulnerability. All of the things we've been talking about really are about vulnerability. The idea of sharing our shame stories, the idea of accepting other versions of the truth, the idea of grappling. None of these are a mindset of, I've got it figured out. I know what's right. I've got this. I'm on it. These are all open mindsets that help us learn and grow. I want to give one tip. We have time for one more tip. I could go on for another hour. Maybe 20 minutes isn't going to be enough for these, but I picked 20 minutes because my Roots Tech talk is 20 minutes. I'm trying to figure out how much I can fit. So you're my experiment, guys. So I want to give one mindset. And this is something that I learned from the book, the wonderful book, Crucial Conversations. And it's the idea that before we approach any difficult conversation, we have to get our hearts in the right place. Genuinely, not saying lip service, but genuinely, is my heart in a place of love, openness, empathy, and desire to save the relationship? Because here's the thing, guys, people don't respond to what you say, and they don't respond to how you say it. They respond to where your heart genuinely is. We can't fake it. We all think we're so good at faking it. Like, oh, I can keep I can keep my straight face and I can smile, whatever. We are not fooling anybody. People respond to what's in your heart. And that's why getting your heart in the right place makes all the difference. We can bungle the words. We can mess up the words. We can say all the wrong things. But when our heart is in the right place, it has a way of being okay. On the flip side, we can say all the right things and still be angry inside, and it's not going to work. And that's where working through some of these things with a friend, a journal, a trusted advisor can help us get to the place where our heart is in the right place, where we can say, I'm sorry, and mean it. I'm sorry. The power of the sincere apology just cannot be underestimated. So, as you grapple with your family on difficult situations, keep those two words with the right spirit in your back pocket. If you approach it with the right mindset of heart in the right place, love, empathy, and desire to strengthen families and tell stories about transformation and healing, it's going to be okay. And you will get through it. It might take a decade, and writing your family stories might open up some things you didn't expect. In fact, plan on it. Plan on it leading you to some difficult places and maybe having to work through some things in your families. But when you get there, drop me an email. If you have a difficult thing you're working through, let me know. Join our Facebook group so that we can kind of help each other. So I'm going to stop the share now and take a few questions through the chat. I also want to, so I'm going to stop the share. I also want to note that in the, I'm going to paste here. I mentioned at the very beginning, I have a flip book on some of the very best insights that we have on dealing with sensitive subjects, some of the things that we didn't even talk about today. So I would love it if you signed up for that. You can get that by going to the link in the chat. And I'm just going to look at the questions. So one from Linda: how do you deal with these issues when interviewing someone else where you can't stop and teach them these principles? So interviewing somebody is a little bit different than writing your own story. When I'm interviewing, the mindset is listening. And if I listen with a whole open heart, again, it's that mindset of you can't fake this. If I'm listening with my whole soul and a spirit of empathy and acceptance of that person, no matter who they are and what they've done or what their situation is, then they will respond to that feeling. So, my job in an interview is just to listen and to help them process. Now, if I'm doing a whole series of interviews, like for example, I'm working on someone's book, I might work through them. There's a fine line between interviewing someone over a period of time, like interviewing and therapy. I am not a therapist, but interviewing can often feel a lot like therapy for people. And in that case, I have the privilege of being the person that they are unburdening to. So that was maybe a little bit of a long answer, and it probably wasn't long enough. These questions are difficult, like short answers, short, on the nose, easy answers. This is not the place for that. So I would love to hear any more questions. Go ahead and pop some questions in the chat. Anything that you're struggling with now. I'm going to wait here for a second until somebody types a question. I'm a good listener. I'm a good silence person. I'm going to wait. Okay, okay. I'm going to give you one more quick example and then we'll go. Okay, I'm wondering about how much I should share. Okay, good. I'm wondering how much I should share from my journal about my children, good or hard. First of all, I think the question about journaling is so excellent. And one of the most important things about your journal is to decide upfront what the purpose of your journal is, and then be clear about that purpose to your posterity. Do not leave your journal to your family without giving them some guidance about what you want done with it. I've seen family members inherit journals and read them and say, I'm not sure I should be reading this. This is making me really uncomfortable right now. And so don't do that to your kids. So first of all, decide what you want to do with your journal. Decide whether your journal is for therapy. And then so what I like to do is I like to think of my journal as my own personal processing. And then I leave other things that are stories that are written and produced the way I want other people to have them. So that's what I think of as a life story as opposed to a journal. So revising that, I would like to revise that now and maybe include the other kids' perspective. And it might be hard for my daughter. I'm wondering if I should just leave it alone. That is truly difficult territory. So first of all, um, I would include the good stuff about your kids. That's the first thing I would include in your story is the good stuff. Because the first thing they will go to, the first thing anyone will go to in your life story is where you've written about them. So make sure it's there and make sure it's positive, right? Because they will love you for that. But as far as the difficult things about your children, I would approach that with extreme caution and sensitivity, and I would write your first drafts in private, and I would let it sit before I would let anybody else read it, and then I would come back to it and read it again with a mindset of how are they going to feel before they see it. Do not, under any circumstances, I'm going to repeat this, do not, under any circumstances, let your family members read your first raw drafts. You will pay dearly for that. You need to give it some time and some space before letting them read those raw first drafts. Because you've got to write a little bit raw where the emotion comes out and the emotion is there. But if they read that, it could backfire big time. So stuff with kids is hard. And I would approach it after you've got a draft that you feel like is ready for them to see. I would approach it with a collaboration mindset and ask them how they feel about it. I wouldn't publish anything without my children's blessing. Um, and I've seen long group discussions about this very topic on like a memoir writing group. I saw one that was like a couple hundred comments long about about children and how they felt about a story and pushback. So it's tricky territory. So a lot of people actually do have to involve your kids. I'd actually have to involve the kids. I don't know if you saw the first part of that question. The revision is a previously written and published memoir with just one of the kids. Um, so let's see. I'd have to. Usually, if you're writing a personal story, it will involve other people, and before you publish it, I just advise getting their collaboration and their buy-in and not publishing it until you have buy-in. Unless you're Tara Westover, who wrote Educated, and you're basically prepared to torch your family relationships. If you are ready to publish a New York Times bestseller, because it's juicy and it's violent and it's difficult and you are ready to walk away from your family, then by all means do that. That's not exactly what I'm advising you to do. I believe in family relationships and I would like to see you have a relationship of healing and love in the future. But she came from an abusive family, so I'm not blaming her at all. I'm just saying that is the consequence. So, well, we are at 5:32. I promised 20 minutes and we went 32 minutes. I could go on all night, but I won't. So I appreciate you joining. This was fun. I hope you had fun. If you did, drop me a note. I would love to keep this going with short, regular trainings. So thank you. Bless you in your work. May your story change your own ending and that of your loved ones. Have a great holiday. See you. Bye. Some of you may be reading the chat like I am now. Very interesting questions and comments. These may be topics for future. I may take one of these questions and do a whole future, uh, like 20 minutes on just some of these questions. I will download the chat. So I'm going to stop recording now.